In an interview on CBS yesterday, Senate Majority Leader John Thune appeared uncertain about whether all of President-elect Trump's cabinet picks would be confirmed.
I think that I suspect a lot of them will get through, and we'll see about all of them. Remains to be seen, but I think that's why we have the process and give all of these nominees an opportunity to make their case.
You've said you have to see if Democrats play ball or not, but you don't need Democrats to get these through. So does that mean you already know some of your Republican senators won't vote to confirm Kash Patel at the FBI or Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon?
We don't have, at this point, I don't think, clarity on that. I think these are nominees who are new enough. They've been going around and conducting their meetings, which I think, frankly, have gone very well. But they still have to make their case in front of the committee. And, we don't know all the information about some of these nominees. I think we know a lot about them, but they deserve a fair process.
Those remarks come as CBS also reports Thune has privately told Trump he believes Pete Hegseth will have enough votes to be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. That's according to 3 sources. Joining us now, senior NBC News national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. My friend, thank you for joining us. Just first, get your take on what Thune said about Hegseth's future and the rest of the cabinet in waiting.
So I promise to answer your question, but first, on behalf of your many fans, myself included,
thank you.
Congratulations.
We will do mimosas right after the segment. I'm going to keep this right over here. Thank you, my friend.
Look, I think if you're John Thune, you don't know exactly how your senators are going to vote. You know that some of them are still reluctant to vote for a couple of these candidates, very worried about what might happen if those people were in charge. I think Donald Trump has picked a variety of people who would be disruptive, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense per se, but I think that's something that the senators want to really look at, and particularly with Hegseth, there's some stuff in his background, his personal background, his conduct in the past that I think is concerning.
Yeah, everything from allegations of misuse of alcohol to misuse of funds, and then, of course, other allegations about being unfaithful in his marriages, and of course, the sexual violence allegations as well. All of that part and parcel to the Hegseth nomination. It's crucial.
And treatment of women in the charity that he operated, right? Just beyond beyond the women outside of that, just the treatment of women who work there. The Pentagon is a huge organization with many women working there, and they need to have faith in their leadership that they're going to be treated fairly. And so I think that's going to be a consideration, not just not just for the Democratic senators, but for a lot of the Republican senators as well.
I want to pivot away from the Hill for a second because I want to get your take on some new reporting that I have this morning. 4 prominent current and former Congressional Black Caucus members are endorsing former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley for DNC chair. That includes one-time CBC chair Marcia Fudge, former January 6th committee chair Benny Thompson, and others, saying in a statement to NBC News, quote, "Democrats are at a crossroads and we need a change now." Of course, the DNC election is set to be held on February 1st. It's a 5-way contest at this point. But when you see these members weighing in favor of O'Malley, after Schumer himself made himself the highest-ranking Democrat to weigh in on behalf of Ben Wickler out in Wisconsin, what does this tell you about the race?
It tells me that there's a real division, real factionalization with the party, and some of it is ideological, and some of it is more practical. One set of endorsers seeing someone as stronger than the other for a variety of things. But what's fascinating about these members of Congress in particular, Benny Thompson, Marcia Fudge, former member of Congress, they are extraordinarily influential within the African-American community, particularly the sort of political elite of the African-American community, and their word is going to go a long way. It's probably not just in terms of their influence, but also who they represent. So you know who might be, riding with them into a storm. They're extraordinarily close with Jim Clyburn. They're extraordinarily close with Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader. And so, this is good news for Martin O'Malley.
I definitely think that's the case. When I saw this news and was able to report it, I thought for sure this is one of those things that when you know the behind the scenes way that things function, these are the key people who have sway within the party. And look, for these folks, we're about to set into a month of forums. This is the start of picking the DNC chair. It's far from over, but the battle is heating up. Senior NBC News national politics reporter Jonathan Allen, thank you for joining us. That was way too early for this Monday morning. Morning Joe starts right now.
Win. Okay, this is not the country I live in. This is just, I refuse to believe that. We're going to win because this is not who we are. I'm very comfortable with my prediction, my certainty that we're going to win, because we're going to win, baby. We're just going to win this thing.
We're going to win. You heard James Carville say it right here and other places. He wasn't the only top Democrat saying that, and confidence was something that was part of what the Harris campaign wanted to project. James, for those who've been watching, continues to be our guest. I just want to mention that he owns up to this in a way that, frankly, a lot of Washington political types don't. You write in the New York Times, quote, "I was wrong about the 2024 election. We lost for a simple reason. It is, and it will always be the economy. Stupid." That's James quoting James. "We have to begin this year," he says, 2025, "with that truth as our political North Star and not get distracted by anything else." The piece also says perception is everything in politics. A lot of Americans perceive Democrats as out to lunch on the economy, and they have to talk about the economy in ways that are persuasive, repetitive, memorable, be entirely focused on the issues that affect Americans' everyday lives. James Carville, why were you wrong? You can expound on what I quoted there. You began to answer it. And second, why is it important to you to own up and maybe write this piece? Again, I'm not trying to be overly nice to you just because we like you.
No,
but I can think of other people in politics who've been wrong, who were wrong or got certain things wrong in the last year, and I haven't seen pieces like that from them. So why is it important to you to write the piece?
Well, first of all, I have a simple rule, being a commentator, a pundit, what you call it is. People will never blame you for being wrong. They will blame you for being boring. Okay? They'll blame you for having a mealy-mouthed thing. So, okay, I was wrong. If you sit here, you do the Ari Melber show, I don't know, 14 times a year, you're not going to make every call right. By the way, it's profoundly right that identity politics was a political loser for Democrats. That was profoundly right that Biden was not running for re-election. It was not the best idea we had. But that's not the question. I'm going to continue. If I have an opinion, I think it's formed, I'll continue to make it. And I'm not going to be scared that I'm wrong. And I don't mind at all people pointing out I was obviously wrong. And I wanted to be right. I wanted desperately to be right. And, there's a lot of people that say, oh, we ought to give up. This is just a racist, misogynist country. Well, you didn't move to Canada, now did you? So this is the country we live in. We got to win in 2026. We got to win in 2028. And let's talk about how we do that. And that's what I really believe. And I promise you, I will be wrong in the future, but I will endeavor to not be boring. That's a motto that I live by.
So let's dig into what you mentioned in the piece as well. We talked a bit about the economy, and I think a lot of folks have talked about that and how much that registered with the voters. You also say you got to get past the Trump obsession, and I want to kind of draw you out on that point because it seems that, and I could show a lot of evidence for this, there were mechanisms on the left that benefited from the Trump resistance, the outrage and concern over his rise in 16 and 17. Entire podcasts, entire political machines, entire fundraising operations, and aspects of the media, right, that benefited from that. That's different, though, I think you point out in the piece, from the broad-based agenda of the national political party to win elections, to wield power on behalf of the public. And so I'm curious if we can be as truthful as possible. Let's put aside the fact, okay, we're talking on a media channel, yada, yada. What do you think about that contrast, that some of the maybe narrators of these issues had a different priority set than the party, and you say the party needs to move past Trump entirely?
Well, what I'm saying, look, I take a backseat to no one in how much I detest Trump and what I think of him. Okay, I'm as fanatical and rabid as the most anti-Trump person you can. But this I do know, and I forgot it, but I'm never going to forget it again in my limited time left on this earth. Voters want an election about them, not about the politicians. And we became obsessed with Trump to the point that we forgot voters and their concerns. That should never happen again. We should make the election, because Trump can't run for re-election, all right? Everything that I see tells me he's going to have a really, really unfortunate time in his term. But what we need to do is focus on people's lives, not Trump's problems. let the legal system and other people, and he'll say enough stupid things and appoint enough horrendous people that will become obvious to people. But while that's going on, I think we need to raise wages, protect people's retirement, expand opportunities to buy or rent a home. Okay, these are the kinds of things. Protect women's rights. You know, it's such an economic relation. I live in Louisiana, which is probably 50th or 49th in childhood poverty for children born into poverty. And if a 32-year-old woman working at the Walmart in Oberlin, Louisiana, has to go, I don't know, 750 miles before she could get a legal abortion. She's got 2 kids. She can't pay for it. Her boyfriend is beating her up. And we got to make that about this person's life, too. She's an important person. She's an economic being. And there are many, many other people that are similarly situated in a lot of states. And let's make it about this and let them fall apart with their billionaire, cut Medicaid, cut Medicare, give all the billionaire class tax breaks and you know, shaft the poor woman working at the Walmart. I mean, that's not that they're going to lose that. But let's make them pay on that. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. And then finally, in the piece, you refer to embracing new methods, new digital media. One of the reasons that the part of the Democratic Party struggled with that is a kind of sensitivity, purity test. Some people call it cancel culture, deplatforming. There's a lot of different words for it. But bottom line, there was a view that you shouldn't even go talk to them, that when Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan a few years back, it was considered a mainstream, valid criticism to say that him talking to Rogan meant he was agreeing with or validating Rogan, and that was unacceptable. When it seems to be, politics is the opposite. If Joe Rogan has 40 million people listening to his thing, and you can use that engagement to bring some of them over, well, that might help with the things you just mentioned, women's rights, minimum wage. What do you think about that, and do you think any of that's changing in the party?
Well, one of the things I'm on a massive campaign to educate myself on how people receive information. I grew up thinking, boy, if you just get an op-ed piece in the New York Times, that's important. A lot of people we know read it. It's a very influential newspaper. I'm very glad to be in it. But there are all kind of other places that people get information. And I think that they have figured it out in ways that we haven't. So rather than curse the darkness, I'm going to light a candle and I'm talking to people is, okay, how are people receiving information? I'm really pushing that we need to do a massive media consumption story because we are using traditional ways to reach people, which apparently from everything that I see, they're getting information from these, and a lot of them are really poor information, okay? I understand that. But we need to understand how people receive information better. And I promise people I'm going to dedicate a good part of my time to trying to learn about it. Because I'm an old-fashioned guy, but the way people receive information is changing by the day.
Back with me. NBC's Ryan Nobles reporting from Capitol Hill. Also joining us, former Democratic Senator of Missouri, Claire McCaskill, and former Republican Congressman of Florida, Carlos Curbelo. Both are MSNBC political analysts who have witness certifications. Here in studio, Jeremy Peters, New York Times national reporter, and Michael Hardaway, former communications director for Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you all so much for watching this along with me. And Claire, we were speaking before we went into that certification process about how we are very much a divided country. 75 million people plus change voted for Kamala Harris, 77 million for Donald Trump, but it was not a majority. She has called Donald Trump a fascist. She has said that he would abuse the powers of the presidency, and she warned he should never again stand behind the seal of President of the United States. And I think it is reasonable to suspect that many of those 75 million Americans who voted for her feel much the same way, Claire. So as we witness what we just saw, for those people who feel as Kamala Harris does, for Democrats, former colleagues of yours who are in Congress, and for just voters, what is their role now in preserving and protecting this democracy going forward?
Well, it's going to be interesting. John Thune has a big job because he has already said very clearly that he wants to protect the filibuster. He wants to require 60 votes for changes in policy. They will have the ability with a simple majority to continue the Trump tax cuts for the very wealthy in this country. They will have an opportunity to spend more money on border security, which frankly I think will have some bipartisan support in a reconciliation bill that only requires a simple majority. But here's the thing, Chris, that we've got to remember. What happened 4 years ago, Donald Trump did not pay a political price for it. And I know that's awkward and uncomfortable and frankly depressing in many ways, but it's true. If you would have asked me 4 years ago if Donald Trump could ever get elected again on this day, I would say no. In fact, if you would have asked me many times during the last 4 years if Donald Trump could get elected again, I would have said no. But the American people, by a slim majority, said, yes, we're going to give him another shot because we're not happy with the status quo. And whether Kamala Harris liked it or not, she represented the status quo. And that was not what the American people wanted. I don't think the majority of America wanted Donald Trump again, but they just didn't want more of the same.
So here's where we are, Jeremy, and I think Claire makes a great point, but there are many Republicans, there are many Americans who still believe Joe Biden was an illegitimate president. Donald Trump has never conceded that election. And just this morning, speaking of January 6th in particular, Republican Congressman Mike Collins falsely posted that this was 4 years ago, thousands of peaceful grandmothers taking a self-guided, albeit unauthorized tour of the U.S. Capitol building. So what does that bode moving forward?
Well, the rewriting of the history of January 6th represents Donald Trump's complete dominance of the Republican Party, not just his dominance, but his ability to bend it and its politicians, its decision makers, to his will, to his lies. I mean, Claire is exactly right. There were many people who thought after January 6th that he didn't stand a chance. He was politically dead. You know who those people included? Many Republicans, like Kevin McCarthy, like Mitch McConnell. There were people who feared for their lives in that House chamber where Kamala Harris just presided over the certification. Trump's doctor at the time, Ronnie Jackson, who is now a congressman from Texas, was standing there with a flagpole he was using in case he needed to wield it as a spear or a club against the rioters that were ready to burst through the House chamber doors. I mean, and this congressman now is just like the other Republicans who insist that January 6th actually wasn't really that big of a deal, that the media and the Democrats have blown it out of proportion. And, sadly, that is the alternate reality that exists in our political system right now, and it's a sign of how deeply divided this country remains. But I think also how many Americans are willing to really kind of deny that the kind of politics that Trump represents is corrosive to our democracy and corrosive to what holds the country and our political system together.
Michael, you were nodding, and I think that's such a great point. It's one thing to talk about a divided country. We've had a lot of close elections in the past. We've had a lot of divided countries. In fact, you could argue that a divided country is part of democracy, right? That people are going to have exchanges of ideas. They feel very differently about any given issue. This is different. This is denying reality. Not just what Claire said, that many people would be shocked to have thought 4 years ago after what we saw happen at the Capitol that Donald Trump could be reelected, but that a Ronnie Jackson could be elected, that so many members of Congress who were there that day and refused to certify, voted against certifying, didn't want to certify the election of Donald Trump would be reelected. So when President Biden today warned about what we were seeing and said the old adage that those who don't remember the past are doomed to repeat it, what are we to make of what we saw?
That's right. I mean, the biggest issue of this era is not right versus left. It's truth versus lies. There are millions of Americans who just don't believe basic facts they read in the Washington Post or what happened on January the 6th. And the president-elect is essentially gaslighting us into saying what you saw didn't happen. So believe me instead of your lying eyes. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we as a party and as a country face.
Congressman, today, Senator Adam Schiff invited Daniel Hodges to the Capitol. Most people will remember him. He's a police officer who was attacked, who was crushed in the doorway during the riot, as you see. And I want to play what he said about attending the certification.
It would be my honor to make it as uncomfortable as possible for the GOP members who try to whitewash that day and lie about what happened and pretend that we didn't save them.
174 Republicans voted to overturn Donald Trump's election loss in 2021. 8 of those senators are currently in office. So, Congressman, are 139 House Republicans. Do you think they'll be uncomfortable?
Well, look, I think any time that you're dealing with one of the darkest days in American history for those who had a role in that, even if it was a minor role, certainly it has to be uncomfortable. But, Chris, I think today is a day not only to remember the horrors of 4 years ago, but also to celebrate the fact that the losers of this election, the outgoing administration, in this case, have reminded Americans of what this day should be, a celebration of democracy. The reason that so many people have come to this country since its inception, including my family, seeking political stability, the rule of law, respect for institutions, accepting election results. Today, we are reminded of why we are the greatest nation in the world. And just like we had to learn lessons from January 6th 4 years ago, I think we also have to learn lessons and take from today and celebrate the fact that we are back on track as a country. Of course, we have to remain vigilant, but we had a peaceful transfer of power the way it should be, thanks to those who lost the election.
Michael, your old boss, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, appeared to take a little dig at his Republican colleagues after Friday's Speaker election, and I want to play that for you.
2 months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle.
Look, this is something that Democrats leaned into in November. It didn't seem to be successful as a message, but is it something that they can continue to talk about, should talk about, or put aside?
I think the reality is that we have to focus on our message, which is what we do for working Americans, and the idea that prices are too high and how the party is going to address that and a litany of other issues. Those pocketbook issues, as a message, should be the focus for Democrats over the next 2 years.
It is January 6th, a date that used to mean very little to most people outside of big political or constitutional nerds. However, since the terrible insurrection of the last January 6th, the last time we had a January 6th certification after election, a lot has changed. On the left, you can see Congress today, Harris presiding. On the right, you can see the same House chamber, which was evacuated 4 years ago because Trump fans that he summoned to Washington were criminally charging that Capitol. They took over the Senate chamber. It was a rare physical and violent illustration of what happens when inside this country we have people willing to break the law and commit violence, even terrible forms of violence, to stop the counting, or in this case, the certifying of the counted votes. Now, Republican lawmakers have moved a lot. Senator Marco Rubio is about to join the Trump administration if he's confirmed, and as a senator, he has a good shot to be. So tonight, for the record, I want to show you what he said exactly 4 years ago on the last January 6th.
Democracy is held together by people's confidence in the election and their willingness to abide by its results. And so the notion was, we need to do something, we need to fight. And several of my colleagues have adopted the idea, and I respect it, that they're going to object. Now listen, it's important to understand something. Even the people objecting in the Senate recognize that it's not going to pass. It's not going to change the outcome, but it's going to send a message. And it's going to make a point. The problem is, I think it's a terrible idea at this moment. Just hours ago, a young lady died in this Capitol. That means somebody somewhere in this country got a phone call that their daughter was dead. Daughter was going to a political rally, she is dead. Died in this Capitol, somewhere not far from where we are standing. We had police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear, getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago. And I think it's important to think about all those things on a night like tonight and everything that's happened. I think politics has made us crazy. Everybody in this country has lost their minds on politics. And we have forgotten that America is not a government. America's not a president. America's not a Congress. Let me tell you what America is. America's your family. America's your faith. America's your community. That's America. That's what our adversaries don't understand, and that's what we need to remember. That is how we're going to rebuild this country and turn the page and have a future even brighter than our past. And so that's why I feel so strongly about this, and why I hope those who disagree with me will understand.
That was Senator Rubio 4 years ago to the day. He felt so strongly, turn the page, rebuild, honor the police who were so savagely attacked by those Trump fans. Today, exactly one presidential election later, that same Senator Rubio is trying to join the Trump administration, which is going even farther than what he knew that day, with Trump vowing pardons for the people who attacked the police that he then claimed to stand up for. That's Rubio. Senator Lindsey Graham has been a very loud supporter of Donald Trump when he had power. Remember, Graham was one of the loudest critics of Trump in 2015 before he got the nomination, warning about him. And he seemed to go back to that mode, at least briefly, 4 years ago today on Jan 6th.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful. But when this Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that they didn't violate the Constitution of Wisconsin, I agree with the 3, but I accept the 4. If Al Gore can accept 5-4, he's not president. I can accept Wisconsin 4-3. Fraud. They say there's 66,000 people in Georgia under 18 voted. How many people believe that? I asked, give me 10. Hadn't had one. They said 8,000 felons in prison in Arizona voted. Give me 10. Hadn't gotten one. Does that say there's problems in every election? I don't buy this. Enough's enough. We got to end it. Vice President Pence, what they're asking you to do, you won't do because you can't. If you're a conservative, this is the most offensive concept in the world, that a single person could disenfranchise 155 million people.
Enough is enough, he said that day. 4 years later, it's not enough. And remember, no one is demanding the politically unlikely that these people just give up forever on the leader of their party, although some, like Liz Cheney, did that. We're just talking about the narrow line of being able to repeat today what they claimed 4 years ago and oppose the pardons being dangled right now for the people who attacked the police on their way to trying to attack and savage and injure or kill them, members of both parties. And you could almost hear the intensity and the fear of Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who during a part of the attack unfolding called into Fox News.
This is so un-American. I condemn any of this violence that's happening in the Capitol right now. I could not be sadder or more disappointed with the way our country looks at this very moment. People are getting hurt. Anyone involved in this, if you're hearing me, hearing very loud and clear, this is not the American way. This is not protected by the First Amendment. This must stop now. As a nation, we've got to come together. This is so unacceptable. What I see happening at this very moment. We can disagree, but we do not take it to this level. People are being hurt. There's been shots that have been fired. This is unacceptable.
you can confirm that shots have been fired inside the Capitol or outside?
I'm with Capitol Police. I heard on the radio shots fired. I watched what was happening inside the building. People have to be locked down. Members have to be locked down. This is the people's house. This is a house that people come in and watch us debate. In a normal time, in a normal America, people would be in the galleries watching us debate each side and have a vote and accept what happened in the end. That's not what's happening today.
No, that was not what was happening that day. In that phone call, you could hear a kind of rawness to Kevin McCarthy. Maybe he still had some aides around, but this was not a written speech. This hadn't gone through a bunch of people. He was just on the phone talking to Fox with reports of shots fired and not knowing what would come next. We later learned that some of the Fox officials he was speaking to, people who worked in that company through the defamation lawsuit, were also horrified, all the way up to Tucker Carlson saying this was a bad thing, because it obviously was a bad thing. Kevin McCarthy, though, when he found that Trump didn't go away, made the famous pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. And remember, while he did all that, it was not enough to save his job. He was still ousted by hardliners from that job he so coveted. Or take Senate Republican leader at the time, Mitch McConnell. Here he was 4 years ago on that crime scene floor.
The United States Senate will not be intimidated. We will not be kept out of this chamber by thugs, mobs, or threats. We will not bow to lawlessness or intimidation. We are back at our posts. We will discharge our duty under the Constitution and for our nation. The United States and the United States Congress have faced down much greater threats than the unhinged crowd we saw today. We've never been deterred before and will be not deterred today. They tried to disrupt our democracy. They failed. They failed. They failed to attempt to obstruct the Congress. This failed insurrection only underscores how crucial the task before us is for our republic. Our nation was founded precisely so that the free choice of the American people is what shapes our self-government and determines the destiny of our nation. Not fear, not force, but the peaceful expression of the popular will.
That's pretty well put. In the days to come, and 2 weeks from now, if Donald Trump makes good on his vows to pardon those people, the convicts, the seditionists, the traitors who attacked police, who chanted for the violence or assassination of public officials in both parties, if that goes forward, this will not be the kind of debate, and it will be an important debate, but it won't be the kind where you need to give someone logic or explore their motivations or try to hear them out. It will be the kind of debate where all you need is a mirror, or nowadays a phone where you can click play on that record, on segments like this from the television or YouTube, and just say to people, here's what you all said. Here's what you claimed. Look in the mirror.